Good morning, folks. This is Deb Delapiana, and this is your chain reaction report. This is the way I'm spending my Thanksgiving. So what we are trying to do here is to present to you a picture of the right wing as it really does exist. We want to show you why it's critical that January 6th does not fade into our history. We want to show you undeniable proof that none of this was an organic event that kind of just happened when peaceful patriots showed up in Washington on the day that the election of Joe Biden was to be certified. We're going to present to you all kinds of background information. This video, by the way, has taken me weeks of research. There are volumes of information out there and more volumes becoming available as the January 6th Commission moves on. And I just have to say that I understand that people just don't bother to look for information anymore. I mean, I think there are people out there that do it. They are not the norm. They are not the majority. People just listen to what memes come across their desk and just reshare them as though they are actual fact. In fact, most memes aren't tied to any facts. The whole meme genre began with the right wing, just so you understand that. Because more than anything, they understand how to brainwash people. And they understand that the American people only listen in sound bites because that's our culture. So I am going to be reading some stuff to you, but I'm not going to be reading all of it. This is going to have volumes and volumes of evidence. I really do think we have a 5,000 character limit in the videos to put all of these links in. We may overstep that. So there may be a situation where we actually post this video and then post all of the links in our blog and attach the blog to this video so they can all get in at one time. We'll see how that works as we move down the pipeline. So before we get into the events of January 6th, because I know I've made videos on this before, I just want to go over some stuff with you again. Let's take a look at something that's what I call really important. So we start out this video not with visions of January 6th, but with a study done between Frontline and the Associated Press. I shouldn't say study, investigation done by the Associated Press and Frontline on how the radical right, the white supremacists, are raising millions of dollars in cryptocurrency. Now, we have people all day long and all night long promoting cryptocurrency as a, what do you want to call it? As a, let's see, solution to the banks owning our country. You know, it's a very naive position to take. Even Edward Snowden is out there in Russia, by the way, telling people to embrace cryptocurrency because he made use of cryptocurrency to reveal his secrets. But the fact of the matter is that cryptocurrency is being used not by the American people in general, but by white supremacist groups to raise millions of dollars. And we're going to go through this just a little bit so you understand what's going on here in this country. You know, is this a solution to the banking industry? No, it isn't. It's not a complete solution to the banking industry. The banking industry isn't trying to block cryptocurrency just because they're greedy, because in reality, the banks would figure out a way to get in on it. The fact is that cryptocurrency is dangerous the way it's being used. And it's not always going to be used for good, just like everything else in life is not used for good. So let's talk about this a little bit. One of the groups making use of this funding is the Daily Stormer. And they literally are out there on the internet advocating for the purity of the white race. They are hate-filled. They talk hate against blacks, Jews, women. Women, do you understand me? Misogynists. They have helped to inspire at least 3 racially motivated murders. And cryptocurrency has made its founder, Andrew Anglin, a millionaire. And millions of dollars in the hands of these people is a very dangerous thing. It is definitely a danger to our democracy. I don't care what Edward Snowden tells you. I think he did an amazing thing when he revealed the secrets he revealed. I have been a big proponent of Edward Snowden, but I have my limits. And I don't follow anyone to the end of the line. I don't agree with Edward Snowden on this. And I have to say that I question his motives these days. But as I've said before, I also question Glenn Greenwald these days. So this guy has tapped a worldwide network of supporters, because this assault on democracy in general is a worldwide effort. And we've made this clear to people when we did the Sunday night stream and we focused on Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a big lover of the way Hitler used propaganda. Steve Bannon was trying to spread the right-wing ideology in Europe. He was in Italy, he was in several other countries. And he is not the only one, okay? He is not the only one. There are people all around the world trying to make this happen. So since January of 2017, Anglin has taken in 112 Bitcoin. It doesn't sound a lot, but the fact of the matter is it's worth 4.8 million at today's exchange rates. Okay, this is information that was given to the Associated Press. And it's possible that he raised even more than that. And he is just one example. He has been, many right-wing groups have been banned by traditional financial institutions, and rightfully so, but they have found a way to make inroads in digital currencies. So it says here, they have taken refuge in digital currencies, which they are using in ever more secretive ways to avoid the oversights of banks, regulators, and courts. It's not just the banks, folks. The AP analyzed legal documents. And they are also using Telegram, which I am on, and blockchain data from Chain Analysis, a cryptocurrency analytics firm. He owes more than $18 million in legal judgments, Anglin, okay? People need to understand this. He owes $18 million in legal judgments in the United States to people whom he and his followers harassed and threatened. And while online, he remains visible. There's stories all over the Daily Stormer's page that carry his name. But in the real world, he's a ghost. His victims cannot find him. They show he was in Cambodia in 2017, but that trail goes cold from there. The Southern Poverty Law Center, by the way, is tracking these people. And this woman, Beth Luttrell, who is a lawyer for the SPLC, is representing one of his victims. And it's hard to use the legal system to stamp out hate groups. She is saying it's getting more difficult and more impossible for that to happen because of online networks and virtual money. We were able to sue the Ku Klux Klan, a terrorist organization, in essence, out of existence, said Luttrell. Doing the same today is much harder. The law is evolving, but lagging behind the harm. So again, let me just, I'm not going to stay in this for too much longer because I want to move along. But in August 2017, a week after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Eng received 14.88 bitcoins, an amount chosen for its oblique reference to a 14-word white supremacist slogan and the phrase Heil Hitler, because H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, worth around $60,000 at the time. It was his biggest Bitcoin donation ever and would be valued at over $641,000 at today's exchange rate. I don't know whether you think these people are raising this money just so they can go out and go to lunch, but I'm assuring you that they are raising this kind of money because they have plans. And they are insistent, and they are never ending, and they are determined in a way that the left can only hope to be someday. So his lawyer may be arguing that that the ban on the white supremacist groups by the banks is what forced them to cryptocurrencies. But the fact of the matter is, any money from anywhere in the hands of these people, whether it's banks or not, is a dangerous prospect. And these people need to be fought with all possible means, because this is not the America we want. At least this is not the America I want to leave to my children. I don't know what you people are thinking. I think you people would prefer to just put your head under the rug, pretend this isn't happening. That would be everybody's preference, but that isn't the real world. So let's move on to the 6th of January. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this stuff, but the fact of the matter is, the people who were in Washington and who committed this egregious act filmed themselves and put themselves on a website called Parler. Parler is a right-wing website. They spent a lot of time planning on Parler, talking on Parler, and then they shared their videos on Parler of what they were doing inside the Capitol building once they broke in. There are videos on the outside, videos on the inside, videos giving you proclamations. This was put out by ProPublica. It is incredible. They have 3 categories right here: around DC, near the Capitol, inside the Capitol. You can go here. You can see videos of them clearly breaking in, climbing in the windows, breaking windows with batons. Now, let me explain something to you. Their constitutional rights allow them to be outside for as long as they want, protesting peacefully. This is not part of their constitutional rights. Had this ever been a Black Lives Matter rally, I promise you, there would be dead bodies all over the Capitol building. But the fact of the matter is, no matter what the right wing tells you, this kind of shit does not come from Black Lives Matter or Antifa. This is the right. Okay? They went in there with the intent to harm people. They went in there with the intent to subvert the democratic process. Whether or not you give a shit about voting, whether or not you like Joe Biden, whether or not you prefer Donald Trump, is not the issue. The issue is that there was no stealing of the election, and we're going to go into all of that. There was no stealing of the election. These people were propagandized, and we're going to talk about how Donald Trump did that with his own hands and used other people to do it as well. And whether you wanted Joe Biden to win or not, this isn't the way we play this game. By going in there and trying to harm people with zip ties, to kidnap people, breaking into offices, threatening people, beating policemen with poles, using battering rams. This isn't what we call peaceful patriots. I don't give a fuck what they're telling you. Okay? They overran the Capitol. They put lives in danger. Okay? And they intended to do that. This was not something that wasn't well planned out. And it is well funded. We're going to talk about all of that too. Okay? We are. Here's another one from the Atlantic. Pictures. In the doorway, legislators afraid. Some of these people, Republicans, hiding because they're fear for their lives. This isn't the way this is supposed to be. Okay, when we used to say as a group that people should not fear their government should fear the people, we didn't mean this way. What we meant is we wouldn't leave them in power. We did not mean that you should go into Congress looking to harm people, looking to stop a process that has been going on for decades, centuries here, and intending to do harm. And all of this, not because they wanted to change anything, but because they wanted to install Donald Trump as president, even though he did not win. And you will learn as we go along that Donald Trump loves dictators. He's got a thing about them. And he wants to be one. And if he is reelected in 2024, even if he's allowed to run in 2024, if he is elected in 2024, he will be unbridled. There will be no holding back what he will do, I promise. Trump for president. The people guarding where the vote was being certified, right here. Armed, yes, but overrun by the number of people. Ashley Babbitt, by the way, was told to stop. She did not. She is not a hero. She's an insurrectionist who made the wrong move. Stealing shit from people's offices, bragging about it, showing it off at an airport, getting arrested, and then complaining about being arrested. Give me a break. There was no end to this bullshit. They literally overran the police, and they overran the police because the warnings were ignored. And by the way, at the time that the warnings were ignored, Donald Trump was in power. Gonna move on here. This is how Donald Trump brainwashed his minions for weeks leading up to January 6th. He tweeted, he talked at a microphone, and he encouraged people to show up in Washington. We're going to look at some of this stuff. On December 12th, he said on Twitter, quote, "Wow, thousands of people forming in Washington, D.C. for Stop the Steal. Didn't know about this, but I'll be seeing them. Hashtag MAGA," end quote. December 12th, later on, quote, "We have just begun to fight," all caps. He tweeted his praise for a report by his advisor, Peter Navarro, alleging election fraud, which had absolutely no evidence of any of that in there. On December 26th, the day after Christmas, the Justice Department and the FBI have done nothing about the 2020 presidential election voter fraud, the biggest scam in our nation's history, despite overwhelming evidence. There was no overwhelming evidence. They should be ashamed. History will remember. Never give up. See everyone in D.C. on January 6th. According to him, history will never forget. The fact of the matter is, many of you people have forgotten this has even happened. It's an insult, really. It's an insult to the people who defended the Capitol. It's an insult to this country for you to just want to gloss this over. Let me just get that off my chest right now, okay? You may think that the right wing is the paragon and the fighter for freedom. They are not. They are not interested in your goddamn freedom. They're interested in their freedom. And their idea of freedom means you have no freedom. Okay? January 1st, The big protest rally in Washington, D.C. will take place at 11 a.m. on January 6th. Locational details to follow. Stop the steal. This is all tweeting. This is all tweeting, okay? On January 4th, at a rally in Georgia the day before the Senate runoffs, Trump repeated his grievances about his own election. He spoke about a continued fight, both for himself and the Senate. If the liberal Democrats take the Senate and the White House, and they are not taking this White House, we are going to fight like hell, I'll tell you right now. Those are other words that came out of Trump's mouth. We're going to take it back, Trump said. These are all weeks and weeks before this whole thing occurred. Brainwashing his minions. He knew who he was talking to. He knew that these people were not rational. He's not rational. And he knew how they would take his call to arms. This is just before the riot. These are his words. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore. And that's what this is all about. To use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. The crowd later chanted, fight for Trump, fight for Trump, fight for Trump. And Trump thanked them. Trump praised the crowd for traveling from across the nation and for the, quote, the extraordinary love. He insisted, by the way, we're gathering together in the heart of our nation's capital for one very, very basic and simple reason, to save our democracy. So in Trump's eyes, saving the democracy is taking the election away from the votes of the people and handing it to him. On its face, this is bullshit. If you people can't see that, I feel really bad for you. And I feel really bad for the country you're leaving your kids. The reality is that Trump and his little minions glossed over everything he said. Another Trump lawyer, Bruce Castor, denied that the siege was an insurrection, saying that's a, quote, term of art. Really? If that was art that you were seeing inside the Capitol, and if that wasn't an insurrection, I'm not really sure what was. You know, in the 60s, the left spent a lot of time on the streets. They did a lot of bad shit, the radical left. Those days are over. I've never seen anything like this. Nothing. This is what one of Trump's attorneys said. No thinking person could seriously believe that the president's January 6th speech on the ellipse was in any way an incitement to violence or insurrection. Nothing in the text could ever be construed as encouraging, condoning, or enticing unlawful activity of any kind. The fact is that the characterization does not resemble Trump's speech. For more than an hour, Trump made the case that he and his supporters at the rally had been, quote, cheated and, quote, defrauded in the, quote, rigged election by a, quote, criminal enterprise made up of some of the, quote, weak legislators the insurrectionists were about to confront. All of this is doublespeak. Donald Trump knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what he was doing before this happened. He encouraged them to do this when he got there. And he continued on. And he's still doing it today. So let me talk to you. Before I close out this opening, I would like to point out something that I learned today. And in the second part, we're going to talk about more about how this was not just peaceful patriots who got out of hand. So here is the fact. This is in the Hill, but it's from Rolling Stone magazine, which I subscribe to because I like their news. January 6th organizers used the burner phones to communicate with the White House. Hang on a minute. Here we go. We have these goddamn Hill videos, which I really am annoyed by. So we're going to move it over. We're going to move over here to Rolling Stone magazine. Okay, so it is in the Hill. I will put both articles in because the Hill has an overview. Rolling Stone has it in depth. I'm going to get rid of that so it doesn't come up again. Okay, so here we are. Now, people who are not trying to hide what they're doing don't buy burner phones. All right, I have a burner phone, by the way. I have a burner phone because I don't want my shit turned over to the government. Okay. But my burner phone actually runs off Sprint. So what it is that the company Boost Mobile, which I use, does not turn over my calls to any organization. But burner phones are used for other reasons. And in this particular case, the person instructing people to buy burner phones made it apparently clear that they were to be bought with cash. I bought my burner phone with a credit card because I'm not hiding anything technically. So Kyle Kremer, who was a top official in the March for Trump, the group that helped to plan this whole thing, he directed an aide to pick up 3 burner phones days before January 6th, according to 3 sources who were involved in the event. One of the sources, a member of the March for Trump team, says Kremer insisted the phones be purchased using cash and described this as being, quote, of the utmost importance. Kyle Kremer took one of the phones and used it to communicate with top White House and Trump campaign officials. There are all kinds of links in here to all kinds of evidence, okay, including Eric Trump, the president's second oldest son, who leads the family real estate business. It also was used to communicate with Lara Trump, Eric's wife and former senior Trump campaign consultant, and also Mark Meadows, the former White House chief of staff, who is very much under scrutiny now by the January 6th committee, and Katrina Pearson, a Trump surrogate and campaign consultant. So one phone was used to speak to them. A second phone was given to Amy Kremer, Kyle Kremer's mother, and another key rally organizer. The team member who spoke did not know who the third phone was given to. But this is what he said, quote, "That was when the planning for the event on the Ellipse was happening. She needed burner phones in order to communicate with high-level people," is how she put it. And of course, Kylie and Amy Kremer did not immediately respond for a request for comment on record. And it has also been revealed that some of the most critical conversations in the planning of this event happened on those burner phones. I'm going to put this all in here. So essentially, we're going to close out this introduction and we're going to come back and we're going to do another part of this video. So just hang on and I will be back. And we will then talk about a great investigative piece that was done by the Washington Post. And we're also going to get into some of the testimony from the Capitol Police, among other things. And we're also going to talk about the money that flowed in to this insurrection. And when you have this kind of money, this is not, my friends, an organic event. I will be back soon. Good afternoon, folks. I'm back. This is It is afternoon too. That's a good thing. This is part 2 of our conversation on right-wing danger in this country. And by the way, the embracing of violence is a solution to the problems in our society, which is something that not only the right-wing groups, the fringe groups do, but it is now something that you will see as we move along down this video, that the minions of Donald Trump, who have been left in the hallowed halls of our government, also parrot. So let's start this one off by taking a look at something here. These are the Donald Trump minions who are residing in our government. There are, these are, for all intents and purposes, insurrectionist and treasonous legislators. There's no sugarcoating any of this bullshit, quite frankly. There are 139 House Republicans out of 221 total who voted to overturn the results of the election of Joe Biden. There are 8 of 51 senators who voted to overturn. Many of these are the usual suspects: Madison Cawthorn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Josh Hawley, Mo Brooks, who, by the way, was present at the insurrection with a bulletproof vest on. And he openly stated that he wore it because he was warned there would be violence. How anybody can possibly think that this was not orchestrated is way beyond me at this point. It either shows a great ignorance of facts, or at the very least, no one can accuse people who believe in this bullshit of being critical thinkers, because they're not. These are the Republicans who voted to overturn the election prior to the violence breaking out. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to read all of their names for you. This is an article from Reuters. And by the way, you're not going to see any articles in here from The Last American Vagabond or anything that what's his name does with Project Veritas. There is a difference between a legitimate news source and the fringe. And all of these facts are facts. These are not up for question or discussion, because these outlets do not publish unless they have them, because they are not allowed to publish. It's called editorial oversight, legal oversight of these entities. So this is where you're going to see the information. I don't give a shit whether or not you believe it's legitimate. I'm putting it out there. I know it's legitimate, and you can choose to do what you want with it. But I suggest to you that people need to start reading again in order to understand what's really going on in this country. They're counting on your ignorance, by the way. So here you go. Here it is right here. All of the people who have worked very hard to keep a despot in office. Okay? By the way, let me just say this. You can't get these people to admit to anything. So it says right here from Reuters, fully 133 lawmakers of those lawmakers, or 90% of the composition who voted to overturn the election, either declined to answer or did not respond to repeated inquiries as to whether or not the election was stolen. Several of them danced around it and said there were anomalies in certain states. And, I hate to tell you this, but in a country where there is no national election system, some states vote in caucuses, some go to the polls. whatever. Every state has a different set of rules. You're always going to have anomalies, okay? You're always going to have anomalies. But the reality is that every single court case that Donald Trump and his attorneys filed to have this election overturned, all the way up to the Supreme Court, rejected every lawsuit. And that would include the Supreme Court. And that really pissed off Donald Trump because he spent a lot of his time during his tenure stacking that Supreme Court so he would have control over it. And at the end of the day, they had no legal precedent or no legal evidence that this election was stolen. And it didn't take them long to just toss that case. By the way, I want to tell you that many of the court cases that were thrown out by judges who were appointed by the GOP. All right, now, two of the biggest gamesmen in this outrageous, egregious attack on the way this country works was by Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, and Sidney Powell, who was Trump's crazy ass attorney. Lynn Wood is another name you're going to hear. These people, by the way, Michael Flynn is a big QAnon man. He's a conspiracy theorist to the max. So is Sidney Powell. Don't ever take that as a compliment. It isn't. Conspiracy theorists get to say whatever they want and not prove any of it because there's no evidence of any of it. And that's why they're called conspiracy theorists. Flynn placed the call to Ezra Cohen, who was the senior intelligence official who previously worked under Flynn. He was in the Middle East at the time, but the article here says that Flynn urged him to get back to the United States because, as Carl writes, he's the man who wrote this book called Betrayal. There was going to be a, quote, epic showdown over the election results. And I'm sorry, you're going to hear little beeps in the background because people are chiming in with stuff on other sites, and I can't do anything about that. Flynn told Cohen that, quote, he needed to get orders signed, that the ballots needed to be seized, and that the extraordinary measures needed to be taken to stop the Democrats from stealing the election, end quote. It says right here in this article, to be clear, this is projection on Flynn's part. The actions he urged Cohen to take would be an effort to steal an election because there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. And there isn't. There isn't. It was reported that Flynn sounded manic on the call. And when Cohen informed Flynn that the election was over and he needed to get over it, Flynn lashed out at him for being a, quote, quitter. Flynn has spent all of this time since the election hanging out in anti-democratic circles, continuing to push the idea that the election was stolen from Trump. He even in May called for a Myanmar-style military coup in the U.S. before, making a joke about his comments and walking them back later. The fact of the matter is you can't take those words back. And there is an article here with his direct quote in it. It will be in the the references. Now, Flynn and Mr. Cohen haven't spoken since the call. But that wasn't the end of the conversation on this subject. Sidney Powell, who was an absolute fucking loon, called him right after Flynn to inform him that the then CIA director, Gina Haspel, had been taken into custody in Germany following a secret operation to seize and destroy an election-related computer server containing proof that, quote, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of votes had been switched. And Powell insisted that Cohen needed to launch a special operations mission to obtain the server, get Haspel out of custody, and force her to confess to trying to destroy evidence of election fraud. Let me explain something to you. Gina Haspel was appointed after having been known as one of the perpetrators at Guantanamo. She is a torturer. She was appointed as a conservative, as a Republican, and she is the last person that would ever concoct this kind of conspiracy. This is all totally a pack of lies. This shit is just made up. This is what happens here, folks. And this is how the right wing has used the pandemic to win over supporters, because they are the fighters for freedom. And, you know, it's easy for them to paint people suggesting vaccines and lockdowns as people who are oppressing you, as opposed to people who are concerned about the general public's health in a country where over 750,000 people are now dead from this pandemic. But they used this, they used all of the stories, they used all of these people are oppressing you. We have constitutional sheriffs who want to enforce the rule of law. Constitutional sheriffs is a term, by the way, that is short for oath keepers. Most of the constitutional sheriffs are oath keepers. These people have found their way into the halls of law enforcement, and we'll put all of this in there. And this is a very deliberate act that's going on here. It says right here, there also, of course, wasn't a shred of truth to Powell's story about Haspel's secret mission to Germany. Cohen thought she had lost her mind and reported the call to the acting defense secretary. Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood and several other of Trump's attorneys, Rudy Giuliani as well, have all been sued, by the way, by the maker of the balloting machines for defamation, for millions of dollars. And in Sidney Powell's defense of herself, she herself stated that no rational person could have believed that what she was saying was the truth. I question people who follow the right wing as to whether or not they are actually thinkers at all, let alone critical thinkers. That's her defense. None of it was true to begin with, so why would you believe me? But Sidney Powell, by the way, continues on, continues to talk and push the notion. This stuff is being pushed to this day that the election was stolen. It's everywhere. It's being pushed and forced and used. This is a basic tenet of propaganda. It's a basic tenet of advertising. When I was in advertising, we used to tell our clients, if you are not prepared to spend $150,000 to run this ad 16 times so that we use the word convince, but the reality is it's brainwashing. So you convince your potential customers that this is the way they need to go. Repeat, 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 repeat. That is what Trump did before January 6th. It is what happened during the January 6th insurrection. It is going on now. Reuters again, talking about the campaign of fear that was spread by Trump supporters. Let me read some of this. And by the way, none of these people have come under scrutiny from the law enforcement in this country, okay? So I'm going to read just a couple of paragraphs here. In Arizona, a stay-at-home dad and part-time Lyft driver told the state's chief election officer that she would hang for treason. In Utah, a youth treatment center staffer warned Colorado's election chief that he knew where she lived and watched her as she slept. In Vermont, a man who says he works on construction told workers at the state election office and at Dominion Voting Systems, those are the people, by the way, who are suing Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, that they were about to die. This might be a good time. I'm going to read this the way it is, okay? This might be a good time to put a fucking pistol in your fucking mouth and pull the trigger, the man shouted at Vermont officials in a thick New England accent last December. Your days are fucking numbered. These are not the words of normal people, okay? Over an election, over Donald Trump. All three of these people that they are citing in this article describe themselves as patriots. I would describe them as patriots because I think that's what the right engenders. Patriots fighting a conspiracy that robbed Donald Trump of the 2020 election. They are regular consumers of far-right websites that embrace Trump's stolen election falsehoods, and none have been charged with a crime in spite of the fact that they are levying threats upon other people. They spoke to Reuters and admitted that they made these threats and that they left other hostile messages to election workers. In all, they are responsible for nearly 24 harassing communications to 6 election officials in 4 states. 7 made threats explicit enough to put a reasonable person in fear of bodily harm or death. The U.S. federal standard for criminal prosecution, according to 4 legal experts who reviewed their messages at Reuters' request. But these people are not really investigated all that much. These are people with everyday jobs who have become radicalized to attack public officials. They are also, this whole attitude is spilling over, and people who are on the front lines of fighting coronavirus are also being threatened. These are people who are already putting their lives at risk by being exposed to the virus as healthcare workers, and they are being threatened by right-wingers who are anti-vaxxers. All right, when is enough enough? But it isn't happening to you, so you really don't give a shit, do you? Yeah. These people really weren't investigated, okay? And it says here in the article that this just highlights the paralysis of law enforcement in responding to this extraordinary assault on the nation's electoral machinery. You know, we do a really good job of looking for international terrorists, but we do a really piss poor job of looking at domestic terrorism. And it's very real. You know, just a little story that's going to take you back some years. I was in Europe on business when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. I was in Strasbourg, France at a meeting. I was not only with people in my company, product managers, marketing managers. I ran the communications department. My advertising agency was there. Several people from, several of the international subsidiaries had all congregated in Strasbourg. And I remember going to breakfast the morning. I was watching it in my room on the television as it unfolded. And I remember going to breakfast that morning, and to a man, everybody at that table pointed fingers at the Middle East. As it turned out, it was a guy named Timothy McVeigh and another guy named Terry Nichols, domestic terrorists, anti-government people who caused all that death and destruction. So we have never been very good at this. We were much better at this in the 60s than we are right now. The fact of the matter is, however, the change in technology has made it easier for these people. You know, some people were not even investigated because the messages were hard to trace. The other thing that stops them from doing a good job on a national level is the state laws that govern criminal threats. But Reuters did interview 9 people who threatened, and all of these people openly admitted that they did it, and they said they did nothing wrong. Ross Miller, a Georgia real estate investor, warned an official in the Atlanta area that he'd be tarred and feathered, hung or face firing squads unless he addressed voter fraud. He said he would continue to make such calls, quote, until they do something. He added, quote, we can't have another election until they fix what happened in the last one. All of this brainwashing has taken hold on the worst elements of our society. It should be noted here that in June, John Sarbanes, a Maryland Democrat, introduced legislation in June to make it a federal crime to intimidate, threaten, or harass an election worker. The bill has not come up for a vote, and that's unfortunate. So let's talk a little bit about the money behind this. Now, as the January 6th Commission moves down the line and subpoenas documents, more and more is being learned. This is from Open Secrets, which I follow routinely. These people don't lie. They are collecting where money is spent. It is a matter of public record. They have a website. They have documents to back them up. They have now released details of how top fundraisers for former President Donald Trump's campaign parked funds with groups that helped organize the January 6th rally. Caroline Wren, W-R-E-N, who is a top fundraiser for Trump's campaign. She was listed as a VIP advisor on the permit granted by the National Park Service for the rally. She boasted raising $3 million for the protest before the Capitol riot. $3 million. You know, I fondly remember everybody having a shit fit when they were accusing George Soros of funding the Women's March. You know what? Good. That's what I say. The Women's March was peaceful. You know, I was put off by it because of the involvement of the Democratic Party, but I'm not anymore. Like I said, I have learned a lot from those days, and I won't make the same mistakes twice. These people are literally raising millions of dollars, so much more money that was ever spent at the Women's March, millions of dollars to literally overthrow the government and change the way it runs, to put it in the hands of the right wingers who will then dictate to you who gets freedom and who doesn't. And I promise you, if you cross the line into people of color, trans people, gay people, women, your rights will not be the same as their rights. She then took that money and parked funds with 2 dark money groups that helped organize and protest the closely tied super PAC ProPublica announced last week. They are still finding money trails. Earlier reports estimated that the rally only cost $500,000, primarily funded by a $300,000 donation from Publix supermarket heir Julie Jenkins Fancelli to Women for America First. Women to America First, who will give up their own rights just strictly to be on the right. These people have also been subpoenaed to testify about, to the January 6th committee. Stockton, who was another player in this group, was also a spokesperson for We Build the Wall. At the time that former White House advisor Steve Bannon and 3 others affiliated with the dark money group were charged with fraud related to the online fundraising effort in 2020. 2 other groups that ProPublica reported on as storing funds for this were the Rule of Law Trust and Turning Point. They were listed as organizers of the rally. Money was also parked with Tea Party Express, but they were not listed as an organizer. They did, however, gain national attention for rallies and bus tours. But it was criticized for diverting a large portion of its fundraising to consultants instead of supporting candidates. The Rule of Law Defense Fund is in the 501c4 affiliated pile, and is also closely affiliated with the Republican Attorney General Association. At least $150,000 of the Rule of Law Defense Fund's money for the rally reportedly came from Fancelli in a December 29th donation, a little more than a week before the rally. Other defense fund donors included nonprofits such as Koch's Network Freedom Partners, Chamber of Commerce, the Edison Electric Institute, Empowering Ohio's Economy, and the Alliance Defending Freedom. These are all right-wing, far right-wing organizations. Tax records show how Turning Point's operation continued to grow in the lead up to the 2020 election and subsequent fallout. Turning Point USA brought in $4.3 million, and its president, Charlie Kirk, reported earning just $27,231 for 65-hour weeks, according to their tax records. In 2018 and 2019, his salary grew to $292,000. In 2019-2020, he made more than $329,000. As their money grew in their coffers, the minions received more money. Here's a related article. Trump Funding Network paid $4.3 million to people, firms who set up the January 6th rally. This again is talking about the same groups. There's a little more detail in here. There are still open secrets links in here that will show you. This is consistent across the board. Here's an article about the public's errors, given money. As we see, we have multiple sources donating money to this cause. Here is the conservative attorney general group involvement in the January 6th march. Now, these people were funded. They were funded by these groups that I've just mentioned. They were involved very much in the, quote, March to Save America. But they also have their own fund called the Rule of Law Defense Fund. They actually have a record of a robocall. And this is what it says. Quote, I'm calling for the Rule of Law Defense Fund with an important message. We are hoping patriots like you will join us to continue to fight to protect the integrity of our elections. And then it prompted people to go to the march's website before ending with a reminder that the call was, quote, paid for and authorized by the Rule of Law Defense Fund, which is now defunct, by the way. But if you go to the Wayback Machine or the Internet Archives, you can find the information you need. And it is in here as well, because nothing ever really goes away on the internet. So in spite of all of this robocalling and encouraging people to come and support Donald Trump, they tried to distance themselves from the violence. This is what they do, okay? They create a situation and then try to distance themselves from it. So what they're trying to do, according to the RLDF, the defense fund, these were rogue people. You know what? I'm tired of hearing about that. As soon as they can prove that to me, and I don't think they can, because they say right here in this article that they were unaware of it, and that they were going to look into it. Sure they are. Yeah. And I'm sure the American people are going to demand that too, because the American people are just so awake and alert. So the takeaway from part 2 of this is that anything that is funded like this is absolutely not an organic event that just kind of got out of hand when peaceful patriots converged on Washington to exercise their constitutional rights. This load of bullshit is brought to you by the right wing and by the seditious, treasonous entities in our Congress and Senate. And we will be moving on into part 3 shortly, and we're going to talk about warnings that were ignored. And we're also going to talk about some of the testimony that came from the people who were there when the event occurred. I'm talking specifically about the Capitol Police. I'm going to read to you some clips and some testimony that's not going to be pretty. I'm not going to, gloss over the terminology that was used. You need to hear it. We'll be back again with part 3 soon. Welcome to part 3 of our video. A lot of what will be presented here is taken from a very large-scale investigation by the Washington Post on the events before, during, and after the January 6th insurrection. Sorry, folks, I'm not calling it anything but what it was. We're gonna talk a little bit, and I'll read a little bit about it to you, and I will post this. I'm moving stuff around so I can get to it. I'll make sure I post this link for you to see in the video itself. So let's start where we are here. So we had again, I'm going to just interject this here because I can. We had a really thorough investigation done by the Washington Post. Now I know, again, we're going to have people shaking their heads because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, blah, 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 blah. But let me just say this. Jeff Bezos does not get involved in the day-to-day operations of the Washington Post. He owns the Washington Post. He helped the Washington Post stay relevant because he had the infrastructure to put the Washington Post on social media and on the internet. And he has pretty much left his newspaper alone from an editorial standpoint. They have posted articles critical of him. They have not stopped doing that. and they, generally speaking, probably my go-to news source. I subscribe to the Washington Post, and I will continue to subscribe to the Washington Post. So let's talk about the red flags. The red flags that were clearly ignored by law enforcement. And, I must say that the person in charge of law enforcement at the time was Donald Trump. This is going to drive me nuts one more time, right? Where is this? Do we know? No, we don't. And I don't really care.
He says, I'm busy right now, I can't talk. And that was the last I heard from him.
It was January 6th, the final time Gladys Sicknick would communicate with her son. After he was attacked with chemical spray and collapsed, his longtime companion, Sandra Garza, got the fateful call to
So I'm letting this play
hospital.
because we're going to be
Did you
talking
just say
about this.
goodbye? No, I did not.
But we're going to stop it right
They
now.
would not let me back to see what.
Okay. And I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so let's talk. Let's go back here and talk about the red flags. So the red flags started, becoming apparent to people before this even happened. I'm going to read this a little bit. The head of intelligence at DC's Homeland Security Office was growing desperate for days. Donald Harvin and his team had spotted increasing signs that supporters of President Donald Trump were planning violence when Congress met to formalize the Electoral College vote. But federal law enforcement agencies did not seem to share a sense of urgency. I have to say that federal law enforcement agencies at that time were under the auspices of Donald Trump and Attorney General William Barr, or whoever replaced William Barr. I think he left, maybe he was gone. I don't really know, but regardless of this, Joe Biden, his election had not even been certified. He was not in a position to do anything. He had not taken the oath of office, and Donald Trump and his administration were still in charge, okay? On January 2nd, 4 days before the event, he picked up his phone and called his counterpart in San Francisco, waking Mike Sena before dawn. Sena listened with alarm. The Northern California Intelligence Office he commanded had also been inundated with political threats flagged by social media companies, several involving plans to disrupt the joint session or hurt lawmakers on January 6th. Again, allow me to say this. People who show up with weapons, and I don't care whether they're guns or whether they're batons or whether they're metal poles, zip ties, they arrested Jane Fonda with zip ties. The plan was to kidnap people. The plan was to harm people. There were legislators, both Democratic and Republican, who were cowering in fear. Mitt Romney was named a target by these people because he was not a friend of Donald Trump's. This was not an innocent little gathering of patriots that got out of hand, okay? So based on this, he organized an unusual call for all of the nation's regional Homeland Security offices, known as fusion centers, to find out what others were seeing. Sena expected a couple of dozen people to get on the line, but then the number of callers hit 100, then 200, then nearly 300. Officials from nearly all 80 regions, from New York to Guam, logged on. In the 20 years since the government created these fusion centers in the wake of 9/11, Sena himself could not remember when this had ever happened, okay? And it says here, for the first time from coast to coast, the centers were blinking red. The hour, date, and location of concern was the same, 1 p.m., the U.S. Capitol, January 6th. He asked his counterparts to share what they were seeing. And then an avalanche of tips started to come in. Self-styled militias and other extremist groups in the Northeast were circulating radio frequencies to use near the Capitol. In the Midwest, men with violent criminal histories were discussing plans to travel to Washington with weapons. 48 hours before the attack, Harvin began pressing every alarm button he could. He invited the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Homeland Security, military intelligence services, and other agencies to see the information in real time as his team collected it. He took another extreme step. He asked the city's health department to convene a call of DC area hospitals and urged them to prepare for a mass casualty event. Empty your emergency rooms, he said, and stock up your blood banks. There are links to all of this, folks. There were numerous people both inside and outside the government who alerted authorities about what was going to happen on January 6th. Now, what the Washington Post uncovered were a cascade of previously undisclosed warnings preceding the attack. Alerts were raised by local officials, FBI informants, social media companies, former national security officials, researchers, lawmakers, and tipsters. New documents and firsthand accounts corroborate all of this. The investigation that the Washington Post undertook involved interviews with over 230 people and thousands of pages of court documents, internal law enforcement reports, along with hundreds of videos, photographs, and audio recordings. Some of those who were interviewed spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe private discussions of sensitive information. The public may have been surprised by all of the shit that went down on January 6th, but you know something? The red flags were everywhere. People saw it coming. People tried to alert people so that this could be stopped. Many people ignored this. One of the most striking flares came when a tipster called the FBI on the afternoon of December 20th. Trump supporters were discussing online, how to sneak guns into Washington to overrun police and arrest members of Congress in January, according to internal bureau documents obtained by the Post. The tipster offered specifics. Those planning violence believed they had, quote, orders from the president, used code words such as pickaxe to describe guns, and posted the times and locations of 4 spots around the country for caravans to meet the day before the joint session. On one site, a poster specifically mentioned Senator Mitt Romney as a target. As FBI officials who assessed the tip noted that its criminal division had received a significant number of alerts about threats to Congress and other government officials, the FBI passed the information along to law enforcement agencies in DC, but did not pursue the matter. The individual or group identified during the assessment does not warrant further FBI investigation at this time, according to the internal report. I'm getting annoyed. So I'm going to take care of that. So the paralysis of law enforcement, the FBI, I mean, some people requested the National Guard. They were never called up. Gee, I wonder why. This was one of the biggest security failures in the nation's history, no matter how you want to look at this. You know, we had evidence of 9/11 coming. We had so much evidence of this, and we were in a position where we could have stopped this, okay? Part of the other problem with all of this is that the breakdown between federal and local authorities remained a barrier. You know, Everything that can be described as security in this country when it comes to domestic terrorism can be called patchwork. There's nothing organized. We've done a great job focusing on the Middle East and foreign actors as terrorist plotters, but we have not, in spite of the Oklahoma City bombing, focused enough energy on internal terrorism, homegrown terrorists in this country. I'm sorry, folks, but that is what the right wing represents today. They're gun toters, they're violence enablers. They see the solution to our problems in this country as violence. And by the way, your legislators, who you pay their salaries with your taxes, even if you haven't voted for them, you're paying their salaries. Your legislators are enabling this. At least 149 of them are. And we'll get into that in part 4. Nobody in the intelligence community envisioned a mass attack. What happened in Oklahoma City wasn't a mass attack. It was 2 terrorists. This was something very different. Something very different, incited, invited, and started by the President of the United States. He was the driving force at every turn. There is no question about this. He invited people to Washington, quote, "Be there, we'll be wild." And it certainly was. So his supporters immediately responded on the pro-Trump forum, The Donald, with under a thread titled, "Trump tweet, Daddy says be in DC on January 6th. Daddy. Daddy says be there on January 6th. Well, shit. We've got marching orders, boys, BOIS. Remember that? The Boogaloo Boys. This is someone named Buttfart88. That'll tell you the mentality of some of these people. He can't exactly openly tell you to revolt. This is the closest he'll ever get. And then someone named Listrope. Then bring the guns we shall. It was the first time since Election Day that the president had urged his backers to turn out in Washington and protest. His message immediately began to shift the intelligence landscape, with the volume of threatening messages about January 6th expanding by the hour. Nobody paid attention to this. Nobody took action. Let me just read these couple of pages to you. As January 6th neared, Trump ratcheted up his calls for action on that day, and the pressure on Vice President Mike Pence, whose role was to preside over the joint session. The president embraced the cast of renegade lawyers who argued that Pence could reject electors from a handful of states and ultimately nullify Biden's victory. The plan was far-fetched and, according to legal experts, unconstitutional. To Trump, Pence appeared open to the legislative maneuvers the president was demanding, soliciting detailed legal analyses to determine how far he could bow to Trump's wishes. Trump primed his base to view Pence as either a would-be hero or a villain, depending upon the path he took. Quote, "I hope Mike Pence comes through for us," he declared at a rally in Georgia 2 days before the joint session, adding, quote, "If he doesn't come through, I won't like him as much." Trump supporters not only knew what his intentions were, but they knew who to target after that statement. Again and again, as the pivotal day approached, top law enforcement officials fielded warnings of what was to come, but failed to respond in kind. Unfortunately, for the people of the country, politics was at play. After months of the president threatening to fire FBI Director Christopher A. Wray, the agency's senior leaders worried about the fact that any public statements by the director might be, quote, asking for a desperate president to come after him. At the Pentagon, leaders had acute fears about widespread violence, and some feared Trump could misuse the National Guard to remain in power. That is something that is new, that has just recently been revealed, and that makes sense too. Military officials took fateful steps to avoid being entangled in domestic unrest, scarred by the president's efforts months earlier to use the military to quash racial justice protests. When at one point, Milley suggested, so this is General Mark A. Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He suggested locking down the city and revoking the permits. But acting Defense Secretary Christopher C. Miller said he feared a bloody, quote, Boston Massacre type altercation that could be exploited by extremists to claim they were under attack by the government. People need to understand the mentality here. This was a tough situation for anybody to be in. Miller, by the way, Christopher C. Miller, was particularly frustrated with justice officials who thought he should be taking charge, and described one call he organized with key security officials and cabinet members as, quote, a shit show. Nobody wanted to touch this. This is part of the problem. Okay? It was basically, permit's good, fencing's up, we got extra park police, we don't need any more, we don't want to talk about this, have a nice day. You know, that was basically where it was. Department of Homeland Security officials received sobering assessments of the risk possible violence on January 6th, including that federal buildings could be targeted by protesters. And, you know, honestly, the Capitol Police have been tracking all of this for weeks, but they were hampered by poor communications and poor planning. You know, this was a breakdown on all levels, and mostly, my friends, it was a breakdown on the part of the government in place to refuse to take control of the situation. And it has been a nightmare ever since then. It's amazing to me that people continue to embrace violence. You know, in the 60s, we had people on the left who were, you know, certainly making bombs, throwing Molotov cocktails and doing that stuff, but not everybody was behind them. Here we have a collective insanity. And it's not just the GOP that's embracing violence as a solution to America's problems. It's some of the people as well. All of this warning and all of this fear did not just happen before this event. There were red flags that were raised during the event while it was going on. So let's go to during. Let's talk a little bit about that. This is, again, the Washington Post. So this total attack on the Capitol lasted 187 minutes. The president watched this, did nothing. People were pleading for him to stand up and stop them. He did nothing. He watched it on a massive flat screen TV, and that's really all he did. Live news coverage showed the horror accelerated minute by minute after 1:10 p.m. when Trump had called on his followers to march on the U.S. Capitol. The pro-Trump rioters toppled security barricades, they bludgeoned police, they scaled granite walls, and then they smashed windows and doors to breach the hallowed building that had stood for more than 2 centuries as a seat of American democracy. This has never happened before, folks, just so you understand that. 25 minutes into Trump's silence, a news photographer was dragged down a flight of stairs and thrown over a wall. 52 minutes in, a police officer was kicked in the chest and surrounded by a mob. Within the first hour, 2 rioters died as a result of cardiac events. 64 minutes in, a rioter paraded a Confederate battle flag through the Capitol. 73 minutes in, another police officer was sprayed in the face with chemicals. 78 minutes in, yet another police officer was assaulted with a flagpole. 83 minutes in, rioters broke into and began looting the House Speaker's office. You know, I find this incredibly annoying that we could send Kyle Rittenhouse to his fate as a hero as he was trying to stop looters while these motherfuckers were doing the same exact thing. 83 minutes in, rioters broke into and began looting the House Speaker's office. 93 minutes in, another news photographer was surrounded, pushed down, and robbed of a camera. 94 minutes in, a rioter was shot and killed. 102 minutes in, rioters stormed the Senate chamber, stealing papers and posing for photographs around the room. 116 minutes in, a 4th police officer was crushed in a doorway and beaten with his own baton. You know, I don't know what you need to understand what was going on here. He watched all of this. Trump did nothing. He didn't act to change anything. He continued, even after this event, to promote the lie that the election was stolen, keeping his goon squad alive for future use. These are the people that wanted to make America great again. All he cared about was how much he was loved and how all of these people came so far to fight for him. Because he is, of all things, a narcissist and a lunatic. There is a link in here that will explain to you how Trump reacted, what his positions were. I will make sure I put that in separately. The Post investigation also revealed that warnings about violence were still happening hours before this thing actually occurred. So the fact that the red flags were up did not result in extra security measures. But some people, even in the Republican Party, were afraid of things to come. Representative Liz Cheney, who has been a very large critic, and I do not support Liz Cheney on many things, but I support her wholeheartedly on this. She hired personal security detail out of fear for her own safety. By the way, Liz Cheney, because she is cooperating with this, is a target for Trump, as is Adam Kinziger, who was the only other Republican taking part on the January 6th committee. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So as he watched on television while the rioters broke into the Capitol, he spent his time raging about Mike Pence. At 2:24 p.m., the very moment that Pence and his family were endangered by violent marauders calling him a traitor, hang Mike Pence. Some of them chanted, by the way. Trump made clear in a tweet whose side he was on. This is him tweeting during the riot. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. Two minutes later, Trump called Senator Tommy Tuberville, a newly elected Republican from Alabama, who had been one of the president's more outspoken allies propagating election fraud claims. Coach, how's it going? Trump asked the former Auburn University football coach. Not very good, Mr. President, Tuberville responded. As a matter of fact, they're about to evacuate us. Quote, I know we've got problems, Trump responded. Many others tried to influence the president. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, a Trump booster, called him and said, you have to denounce this. Trump falsely claimed to McCarthy that the rioters were members of Antifa. This is how all of this bullshit starts. Wake the fuck up, people. Seriously. Antifa would no more work to install Donald Trump. They fight fascists. Antifa has been around forever. This is not a new thing, okay? Antifa fights fascists. They don't install them as president. McCarthy corrected him and said that they were, in fact, Trump supporters. Trump responded, you know what I see, Kevin? I see people who are more upset about the election than you are. They like Trump more than you do. He tried to tell him to call these people off. And he responded to Kevin McCarthy, Kevin, they're not my people. At the end of the day, however, let me just say this about Kevin McCarthy. He has continued to support Trump. He has continued to ignore the calls for violence from legislators under his control. And he has instead sought to punish people who voted with the Democrats for the infrastructure bill. He has not done one thing to stop the call for violence. And the reason he doesn't is because he has a political future. And giving in to Trump is much more beneficial for him. He did his part on that day. It didn't work. So we will just continue to propagate the bullshit after the fact, now that it is passed. Donald Harvin, who was mentioned earlier in this report, who raised the red flags to begin with, pulled into the Baltimore-Washington Parkway to head downtown from suburban Maryland and was surprised to find himself in heavy traffic. Then Harvin noticed the car in front of him had an out-of-state license plate, and so did the one beside that. He was surrounded. Every car he could see in front of him and in the rearview mirror had flags, bumper stickers, or other pro-Trump paraphernalia. He called Homeland Security to tell him what he was seeing. This is going to be twice as big as anything we thought, he told one of his deputies. Across from the FBI's headquarters downtown, some Bureau personnel began the day mixing with MAGA protesters at an Au Bon Pain as they ordered coffee and breakfast. One official noticed the young man wearing a tactical vest and briefly wondered what made him think he needed to wear military-style gear to a political rally. It wasn't a political rally. Liz Cheney, who actually is the de facto leader of the anti-Trump Republicans, was only number 3 in the House Republican leadership, so she did not receive round-the-clock security detail from the U.S. Capitol Police. She arranged her own. She actually took to Twitter at 7:11 a.m. to denounce the effort by a growing number of her Republican colleagues to try to give Trump a second term by rejecting the Electoral College results. This was her tweet. We have sworn an oath under God to defend the Constitution. We uphold that oath at all times, not only when it is politically convenient. Congress has no authority to overturn elections by objecting to electors. Doing so steals the power from the states and violates the Constitution. On the drive to work, Cheney spent much of her time trying to lock down assurances from fellow House leaders that she and any other Republican voting to certify Biden's victory would be able to speak on the House floor during the proceedings. Nearby, Paul Hodgkins perched on a tree to get a good view, worried about street skirmishes. He had come prepared. Hodgkins had wrapped his forearms in leather gauntlets he had worn in wrestling matches. A few blocks away at the Washington Monument, a mob of Trump supporters overran police at 9 a.m. One U.S. Park police officer radioed. You can listen to these dispatches. They're all right here. We have about 300 people up here. They're all refusing to leave. Within minutes, the dispatches from officers on the scene worsened. There's a large crowd that's following us. We're going back into the monument with the individual that's under arrest. They're breaking through the bike fence. Units are backed into the monument. Everyone's breaking through the bike racks. At 9:46, another report. We have individuals with shields and gas masks at the statue. Okay, they're at the Lincoln statue with shields and masks and taking pictures right now with a flag that says, fuck Antifa. And then another officer radioed in. Just for safety, there's a guy, a white male, walking around the flag circle with a pitchfork. These were all scenes of what was to come. The idea was not to agitate them. They didn't need to worry about that. They were already being agitated. Around 9 a.m., 4 of Pence's top aides, Chief of Staff Mark Short, Legislative Affairs Director Chris Hodgson, Counselor Greg Jacob, and Press Secretary Devin O'Malley met up with the Vice President at his Naval Observatory residence. They reviewed for the last time the formal letter they had drafted to Pence to send to members of Congress, notifying them of his intention to follow his constitutional duty and oversee certification of the Electoral College results. This made Mike Pence persona non grata. We have it all right here. I'm not going to read much more to this. 5 hours to go, more red flags. Okay? You expect the Capitol Police to hold that back? Amazing. This is all right here, okay? All of this. Now we have it with 2 hours to go. Around noon at the Capitol, Representative Liz Cheney headed into the GOP cloakroom, an anteroom just off the chamber floor where members gather to relax. Inside, along the wall, sat tables with stacks of paper on them. Republican members lined up to sign the sheets. Cheney poked her head around to see what they were signing. They were registering as co-sponsors to contest Biden's victory in 6 key states. Only one House member and one senator needed to sign to prompt the chambers to split apart and debate the merits of each contested state. However, many Republicans wanted to have proof that they supported these contests, so dozens upon dozens signed their names. One of them muttered as he signed, quote, "The things we do for the orange Jesus," end quote. Anybody who thinks this is the way government should operate, paying fealty to a dictator, is out of their minds. This isn't about freedom, folks. It never was. Let's get back to the top for a minute, because this didn't end here. We're going to come back to this report for the aftermath part of it. So I'm going to leave it up. When I come back, we're going to talk about the January 6th Commission, the testimony of the officers involved, the abuse they suffered, and then the final piece, which will be part 5. We'll be talking about how we've continued on. As a country. To appease Donald Trump in his quest to be reelected, in his quest to continue the narrative that he was robbed, that the elections are rigged, none of which are supported by any factual information. So I will be back. I'm going to take a break now too and cook my dinner. So I will see you all soon. Okay, guys, here we are. I'm back from my Thanksgiving dinner, and which was right here in my very house. And I'm ready to move on here to part 4. And with part 4, we're going to talk about the January 6th Commission and why a January 6th Commission is essential. This event on January 6th is not normal, okay? It is outside the realm of anything that should ever have happened in this nation. Let me make one thing very clear, okay? In the 60s, at a time when unrest was at a peak, this never happened. This has never happened before. And this can't be allowed to sit, minimized, put under the carpet, and not dealt with. There is no retreat from this. If this is allowed to just pass into history as an anecdote without investigation and accountability to those involved, this country will remain in danger. Right now in America, there is no terrorist entity that is as dangerous to this country as the domestic terrorists inside this country. And I'm referring specifically to the right wing, and I am referring specifically to the Republicans in the Republican Party who will not stand up to Donald Trump. This now has become not just Donald Trump's coup, this is a GOP coup. If you are not standing up like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinziger, you are part of this game, okay? If you are ignoring, minimizing, defending, signing things that say that the election should be overturned, but remaining silent and not saying that the election wasn't stolen, even though you know it wasn't, you are just paying homage to the orange jackaloon. You are part of this insurrection, okay? So let's talk about this committee. As originally negotiated in the House, it would be bipartisan, 5 people from each side of the aisle, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, as negotiated between Nancy Pelosi and Mr. Loser there. You know, I can never remember this guy's name, and Kevin McCarthy, and I swear to God, I can't remember it on purpose because I find him revolting. So they negotiated in good faith with Kevin McCarthy, knowing that once it got to the Senate, it would be squashed, and it was. And the idea, of course, was that without the Republicans agreeing to it, there's no way this could go on. But you know what? The Democrats did the right thing. And Liz Cheney and Adam Kinziger did the right thing to break from their party and to be on this commission. They are both Republicans. They are both Republicans who know and who are not afraid to say that what happened on January 6th is not the norm, cannot be the norm, was an affront to American democracy, an insult to this nation, an insult to its institutions, and that the party as it stands right now is a detriment to freedom. So let's go take a look at some stuff here. This is the website of the January 6th Select Committee. You can find anything you want here. You can watch stuff live. You can go and see hearings. You can go to the media center. You can look at their activity and see what they're doing. I recommend, and there's a tip line, and I would honestly recommend to every American, if you really care about this country, if you never mind caring about this country, all right, let's bring this right down to brass tacks here. If you really care about your future, your future, you know, Americans love that shit. All about me. If you care about your future, you're paying attention to this. If you are, you know, a right winger, you don't care about any of this. This is not on your ballot. This is not on your bailiwick. This is not something you care about because you believe that you should be in charge of the nation. It's as simple as that. These are the lawmakers who will be investigating the January 6th attack. We have Benny Thompson, who is the committee chairman. He's from Mississippi, Democrat. Zoe Lofgren from California. She was elected in '94. Adam Schiff, California. Jamie Raskin, Maryland. Pete Aguilar, California. Stephanie Murphy, Florida. Elaine Luria, Virginia. Liz Cheney, Wyoming. Maybe not for long. What has Liz Cheney gotten for doing this? The Wyoming GOP just voted to stop recognizing her as part of the party. She has been threatened physically. She has been stripped of committee assignments for participating. Adam Kinziger, he was appointed by Pelosi. He's from Illinois. He is an outspoken critic of Trump, and he voted with Cheney and 8 other Republicans to impeach the former president following the January 6th attack. He is now persona non grata. And this is what he says. The moment requires a serious, clear-eyed, nonpartisan approach. We are duty-bound to conduct a full investigation on the worst attack in the Capitol since 1814 and to make sure it cannot happen again. Understand what we're saying here. Okay? If this is allowed to just slip away, the door remains open. And I will tell you this. Donald Trump is determined, vindictive, and there will be no end to this if this is not stopped. So the first thing they do is they meet. Let me just say one thing before we get into this. So they killed the committee, and now, of course, you know, it gets presented as a witch hunt on the part of the Democrats, which it is not, because it has 2 Republicans on the committee. And this is where I give you my opinion. They had their shot. They had their shot to be part of this. They chose to block it. They chose to block it, all because Nancy Pelosi would not put people on the committee that was suggested by Kevin McCarthy who were pro-Trump supporters. And people who, by the way, had contact with Donald Trump prior to the insurrection, such as Jim Jordan, who was also under investigation. This needs to be as clean a look at this as possible. And to seat those people would not have worked. Okay? So they had their shot, 5 from each side. That's not the way it's working out. Okay? And it's not working out because of their own doing. So they open with accounts of what it was like to be in front of these people and being attacked. So one guy, Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, testified that, quote, January 6th still isn't over for me. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn told lawmakers describing how protesters dressed in Trump campaign paraphernalia called him the N-word. I'm just going to use it. Called him nigger. Don't ever talk to me about the fact that Trump isn't a racist and that his followers aren't, because that's a pack of shit. Okay. They did the same to several of his Black colleagues. It was not just to him. So the videos, there were also videos, and I will make sure that all of these videos are in here. These videos show the violence that was perpetrated on these guys. One gentleman whose name is, I just want to get his name right, Officer Aquilino Ganell, is a naturalized U.S. citizen, an Iraq War veteran, meaning he served this country in Iraq, okay? He called what went on inside the Capitol as a medieval battle, okay? He told the committee about how his hand, shoulder, calf, and foot were hurt in the attack. And he explained that he did not even want to hug his wife when he got home because he was afraid of the chemicals that had seeped into his clothes and were burning his skin. And he did not want to make her sick. Quote, to be honest, I did not recognize my fellow citizens who stormed the Capitol on January 6th or the United States that they claimed to represent. Nothing in my experience in the Army as a law enforcement officer prepared me for what we confronted. There were more than 140 officers injured in the attack that day. There were basically 150 officers left to face 9,400 protesters. Protesters, let me say it right, insurrectionists, treasonists, traitors. So these people were wildly outnumbered to begin with. They suspected that many people had guns that were concealed so that they couldn't be seen. And one officer said, if this turned into a firefight, we would have lost. They would have lost, and they would have lost big time. To those who have followed the various congressional and criminal investigations of the January 6th riot or Trump's second impeachment trial, Hodges may be familiar as the police officer who was crushed in the door by protesters trying to breach the Capitol. His screams have been featured in video that has been aired in the Senate chamber, across television networks, and again in the House Select Committee on the opening day. He called the people that attacked him terrorists. However, the officers that testified on the first day said that despite being targeted by the mob, they also tried to help the protesters who were injured in the attack. Dunn told of helping carry one woman to the Capitol office of the House Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, where she was administered CPR. Since this has happened, there have been 4 officers who have committed suicide, just so everybody understands this. Kinziger asked all 4 officers who testified on the first day how it made them feel when people said it was time to move on from January 6th. Does this feel like old history and time to move on? The response was no from every single one of these people. When it got to Hodges, he said, there can be no moving on without accountability. This is absolutely true. This needs to be dealt with. This is not okay. Not okay. I'm just trying to find some more testimony here that I can read to you really quick. And I will put all of this in here, including some videos. This is another story related by Dunn, who I just mentioned. He said he was in the speaker's lobby outside the House chamber, which is where the election was being certified, by the way. When he suggested that people should leave, the insurrectionists responded that, quote, Trump invited us here and that he was still president. Quote, nobody voted for Joe Biden, the man told him. Dunn, although he says he never lets politics seep in, did say to the man that he had voted for President Biden, and then he asked, doesn't my vote count? He then told the panel, a woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, quote, you hear that, guys? This nigger voted for Joe Biden. And then the crowd of 20 around her joined in screaming, boo fucking nigger. No one had ever called me a nigger while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer, he said. You know, this shit is just beyond the pale. And every single one of these people, when asked why they fought back, said it was for democracy. And it is for democracy. No matter how much you want to, sit around and dump on America, and that's fine. I do it too. I point out things that I think are bad, and we all do that. The fact of the matter is, there is a system for addressing these grievances, and it doesn't lie in violence. There are other ways to do this. Had these people simply, 10,000 of them amassed outside the Congress with signs protesting peacefully, not hitting people with pipes, not spraying pepper spray and bear spray on them, not tasing them like they did Michael Fanon, then that would have been guaranteed under the Constitution. This is not guaranteed under the Constitution. This is unacceptable. This is, for all intents and purposes, a domestic terrorist attack. There is no question about it. One of the people who testified said that we needed to get to the bottom of it. Quote, if a hitman is hired and he kills somebody, the hitman goes to jail. But not only does the hitman go to jail, but the person who hired him does. I want you to get to the bottom of all of this. This is what they are asking. And this is what every American should be demanding. Seriously, I can't express to you. For people who sit around on social media all day, I can't express to you how I have spent hours on this video and have looked at footage, have read hundreds of articles, and I am, more convinced than ever that this cannot be allowed to stand. These people were propelled to the Capitol based on lies, based on brainwashing of those lies. They have been empowered to be bigots, to hate. These aren't patriots, they're hatriots. There's a difference. This all needs to be brought out. We need to know. We have a right to know as a nation which one of our legislators was involved in the planning, which ones assisted, whether it was in person or through tweets or through texts, any of these people. All of this needs to come out, okay? We heard back at the beginning that Lauren Boebert tweeted out the location of where they were taking the legislators. We heard a lot of that stuff. We also heard that Lauren Boebert took people on tours of the tunnels underneath the Congress, and she insisted that they were family members. She's got a big goddamn family then. There's reason to believe that some of the insurrectionists were involved in that. We need to find out all of that. And then if any of these people were directly involved, they don't need to be voted out. They need to be removed from office. I don't really care if the governor of that state, if someone is removed and they appoint another Republican. I don't care. But the people who were involved in this, they need to go. Period. Probably the most famous person, because he's one of the most outspoken people, would be Michael Fanon. I have his entire testimony here, the entire transcript. I'm just going to read a few pieces of it, okay? At one point, I came face to face with an attacker who repeatedly lodged for me and attempted to remove my firearm. I heard chanting from some in the crowd, "Get his gun and kill him with his own gun." I was aware enough to recognize I was at risk of being stripped of and killed with my own firearm. I was electrocuted again and again and again with a taser. I'm sure I was screaming, but I don't think I could even hear my own voice. My body camera captured the violence of the crowd directed towards me during those very frightened, winning moments. It's an important part of the record for this committee's investigation, for the country's understanding of how I was assaulted and nearly killed as the mob attacked the Capitol that day. And I hope that everyone will be able to watch it. The portions of the video I've seen remain extremely painful for me to watch at times, but it is essential that everyone understands what really happened that tragic day. During those moments, I remember thinking there was a very good chance I would be torn apart or shot to death with my own weapon. I thought of my 4 daughters who might lose their dad. I remain grateful that no member of Congress had to go through the violent assault that I experienced that day. During the assault, I thought about using my firearm and my attackers, but I knew that if I did, I would be quickly overwhelmed. And that, in their minds, would provide them with the justification for killing me. So I instead decided to appeal to any humanity they may have. I said as loud as I could manage, "I've got kids." Thankfully, some of the crowd stepped in and assisted me. Those few individuals protected me from a crowd and inched me towards the Capitol until my fellow officers could rescue me. I was carried back inside. What happened afterwards is much less vivid. I had been beaten unconscious and remained so for more than 4 minutes. I know that Jimmy helped to evacuate me from the building and drove me to MedStar Washington Hospital Center, despite suffering significant injuries himself. At the hospital, doctors told me that I had suffered a heart attack, and I was later diagnosed with a concussion, a traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder. What makes the struggle harder and more painful is to know that many of my fellow citizens, including so many of the people I put my life at risk to defend, are now downplaying or outright denying what happened. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful. You know, people need to seriously understand that there is absolutely, in the realm of all of this, there is absolutely no way in hell that any of this should be viewed as insignificant. This is a grave mistake. The American people should be demanding answers. And the American people should be in support of what the January 6th Commission is doing, instead of sitting around on social media lionizing Kyle Rittenhouse. And we're going to talk about him in the next part. So the committee, after hearing the testimony, has now written to the National Archives and asked for a whole bunch of documents. In a letter, you know, they have requested documents. These are some of the things they wanted to see. All documents and communications relating in any way to remarks made by Donald Trump or any other person on January 6th, including Donald Trump's and other speakers, public remarks at the rally on the morning of January 6th, and Donald Trump's Twitter messages throughout the day. All calendars, scheduled, and movement logs regarding meetings or events attended by President Trump. All documents and communications regarding the movements and protection of Vice President Pence. All video communications recorded of the president speaking on January 6, 2021. All photographs, videos, or other media, including any digital timestamps for such media, taken or recorded within the White House on January 6, 2021, are taken of the crowd assembled for the rally on the morning of January 6th, and all communications or other documents related to that media. Now, Mr. Trump invoked executive privilege. And a federal judge, as reported in the Boston Globe, a federal judge refused to block the January 6th records request. It has since, been taken to an appeals court. It was temporarily blocked by that judge. But there are indications that that's not going to sit. Now, I'm sure that Donald Trump is ready to take this to the Supreme Court and fight, and that's fine. But given the fact that the Supreme Court would not hear about, would not even hear the case about the election being stolen, my gut feel, and the gut feel of people who are experts in this, is that the documents will eventually be turned over as requested. So let's talk about the people they've subpoenaed. Now they have subpoenaed people. Steve Bannon, probably being the most famous, he has refused to comply. The select committee chose to return a criminal complaint against him, which was enforced by the courts, and he was found guilty and arrested. Where he continued, by the way, to threaten people and to threaten retaliation as he was turning himself in. Now we have Mark Meadows, who has been subpoenaed, and he is not cooperating. And that will probably follow the same pattern. So the teams that have been, people have been subpoenaed already are the senior team, which was, they were subpoenaed on the 23rd. The Ellipse rally, a bunch of activists and staffers involved in the planning of the rally. The Hill rally, those activists involved in the broader Stop the Steal effort and rally plan for Capitol Hill on January 6th. Jeffrey Clark, former Justice Department official, was subpoenaed independently. A number of people who worked for the Trump campaign were associated with the rally, were subpoenaed on November 8th. And the White House was subpoenaed on November 9th, and these are staffers from the White House. Donald Trump has not yet been subpoenaed. So these are the names of the people. Ali Alexander. I'm not gonna, read all of these people. I'm just gonna mention their names. They are all in this article from the Washington Post. You will need to look at them, the article, to find out who they are. Steve Bannon, senior team. He had a deposition scheduled for October 14th. He routinely communicated with Trump about this event, about the election being stolen. He was one of the biggest proponents of the lie, the big lie as it is called. And as I said, he has been arrested and charged with criminal contempt. Lyndon Brentnall, Justin Caporal, all of these people were subpoenaed to be deposed. Jeffrey Clark, John Eastman. So here's an important guy. He is the author of what is being called the coup memo, which was basically a legal document outlining how Vice President Mike Pence could simply ignore submitted electoral vote tallies on January 6th. He also spoke at the rally. Michael Flynn, who, as I said, called for a coup in the United States. And on and on. This list is pretty big. Bernard Kerik, longtime ally of Trump, and attorney Rudolph Giuliani. Amy Kremer, the former Tea Party activist and failed congressional candidate. Christopher Liddell, a former business executive. Liddell joined the White House in 2018. Nathan Martin, who worked with Ali Alexander's Stop the Steal organization. All of these people need to be spoken to. Kayleigh McEnany, a cable news pundit turned White House press secretary. On the same day that she was subpoenaed by the committee, she was identified by the Office of Special Counsel as having violated the Hatch Act, illegally campaigning while serving in Trump's White House. And here's a name for you, John McEntee. McEntee at one point served as Trump's body man, the role later played by a gentleman named, his name is in here too, I just went by it, Nicholas Luna. But for McEntee, after being ousted from the administration because of questions about his gambling habit, he returned and was put in charge of personnel decisions. And my God, a position he has absolutely no qualifications to own, okay? He is being described by ABC News' Jonathan Karl as the man who made January 6th possible. Mark Meadows, Trump's chief of staff. He is now refusing to cooperate. There's a whole list of people. You can go through these yourself. You don't need me reading to you. You all know how to read, I hope. But one of the gentlemen that we talked about in that last list there wrote the memo that would outline how they, in fact, could steal the election, because that's exactly what this was about. This memo became public after it was uncovered during the writing of the book Peril from Washington Post journalists Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. So this memo, which received, honest to God, not much attention in the press, which it should have, basically he threw out the scheme, and under that scheme, Eastman advised Pence that he would have declared Trump the winner with more electoral college votes after he threw out the results from 7 states. So his memo included a 6-step plan for Pence, okay? Claiming that he should throw out the results in 7 states because they allegedly had competing electors. In fact, no state had actually put forward an alternate slate of electors. There were merely Trump allies claiming this without any authority to be electors, okay? Under Eastman's scheme, after he threw out these 7 states, he could declare Trump the winner with more electoral college votes, 232 to 222. Okay? Anticipating howls, as they put it, howls from Democrats protesting the overturning of the election, the memo proposes, Pence would instead say that no candidate had reached 270 votes in the Electoral College. That would throw the election to the House of Representatives, where each state would get 1 vote. Since the Republicans controlled 26 state delegations, a majority could vote for Trump to win the election. All of these things were laid out on paper, my friends. The plan was proposed to Pence on January 4th, when Trump was in the Oval Office with him. And this is what Trump said to Pence. You really need to listen to John. He's a respected constitutional scholar. Hear him out. However, at the end of the day, Mike Pence did not go along with Eastman's scheme. He did his own consultations before January 6th, Pence. And he reached out to former VP Dan Quayle and the Senate parliamentarian, who were both clear in telling him he had no authority beyond counting the votes. So regardless of what he was being told by John Eastman, it was actually Mike Pence who followed the rule of law that day. And this article goes more into detail about how they contacted Lindsey Graham, making their case that the election had been stolen. We've had evidence that there is actually a criminal investigation ongoing, when it was learned that Trump called Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, and told him to, quote, find, end quote, more than 11,000 votes that Trump needed to win. Now, the Washington Post literally wrote an article complaining that nobody covered this. However, they did give credit to CNN for providing the most coverage. And this is the actual memo right here. It is not doctored. It is not made up. It is actually written by John Eastman. It actually does outline how the GOP can steal the election, because that's what they were trying to do. I will put this in from a few sources as well, so you understand just exactly what was being requested here. Here's a little story I will put in about John Eastman himself. So we are right now in the midst of what I envision being a very long legal process of investigating just exactly what happened on January 6th, but it's something that absolutely has to happen. You know, we have a situation here where this could happen again. You know, we are in a situation where we are now passing laws on a state by state basis that basically marginalizes certain groups of people, prevents them from voting. You know, the next coup might not be like January 6th. The next coup might be, you know, basically taking place right now on a different level. Like I said, this is a complicated issue. And we're going to talk a little bit in the next section, which will be, I know will be the last section of this video, where we talk about the fact that as all of this is going on, and, you know, this is being fought on so many levels, people have to push back on these voter registration laws. You know, it's just outrageous that this is even happening. And, you know, again, as I've told you before, the American Legislative Exchange Council, these voter suppression laws, they're being done state by state in states where they have GOP governors. And as they are passing, other states with GOP governors and the same ideology are just, you know, using cookie cutter legislation, because that's what ALEC does, the American Legislative Exchange Council. It literally has legislators from the state and local level paying dues to pass cookie cutter legislation across the country. So in addition to fighting back against that, we have to keep our eyes on this too, because you know what? If they can't do this way, we will see January 6th. And it may be worse this time, because honestly, it could have been a whole lot worse than it was. And it was bad. No matter what you're thinking, it was bad. You just go ahead and spend some time on Parler. Spend some time listening to these people talk. It's all out there. You know, the only thing that's keeping you from looking at it is you. I'll be back with the last section shortly. Hi, folks. Here we are with part 5, and this is the end of this video, because honestly, with all the information I have, I could go on forever. But I don't really think there's a need to at this point. You people should be able to grasp what's happening here by now. So, you know, bad things can happen, right? And we all know that. So we have bad actors. Every political group, every political party has them. Donald Trump happens to be a bad actor in the American political spectrum. He is a cancer on the country. He has literally single-handedly destroyed the Republican Party. For better or for worse, this party should be judged by how it has responded to all of this happening, okay? With the January 6th stuff, all the stuff that's gone on subsequent to this, the people that are Donald Trump's minions that are in office, that continually invoke violent images, threaten violence if the elections continue to be rigged. It is how a party responds and stands up that it should be judged. In the Republican Party, for all intents and purposes, has taken part in this insurgency. Those people who are not directly involved in this, not talking about this, but remaining silent, sitting on the sidelines, continuing to bow down to the orange jackaloon, more concerned about their political lives and doing what's right for the people of this country and what's right for the country itself. These people are all part of the game. This is no longer just Donald Trump's coup. This is the Republican Party's coup now. They own this baby, okay? We'll take a look at a few things here before I close this out. This is an article that just appeared today. Republicans are fomenting a violent insurgency in America. It may have already started. It certainly has already started, okay? The United States has a serious problem with political violence, particularly right-wing violence, which has overtaken Islamist attacks as the #1 domestic terrorism threat. Let me repeat that. It is now the #1 terrorism threat in the United States of America. The right wing, American people in this country on the right. The list of right-wing outrages includes Oklahoma City, which I talked about earlier. That was 1995, 168 dead. Pittsburgh in 2018, 11 dead. And El Paso in 2019, 23 dead. The 2020 Kenosha, Wisconsin shooting, which left 2 dead, is part of the same alarming trend. Even though Kyle Rittenhouse was found last week to have acted in self-defense, he remains morally culpable for showing up with an assault-style rifle at a protest looking for trouble. End of story. I don't want to hear about the heroic bullshit. I don't want people coming on to Facebook and Twitter and telling me, but he cleaned graffiti off of buildings. He shot and killed 2 people and shot a 3rd person and wounded him. Had he stayed where he belonged and not walked into that with an AR-15, that would not have happened. Let's stop downplaying this. The 2018 pipe bombing attempts targeting critics of President Donald Trump was only narrowly averted. The January 6th riot was both horrible and not nearly as bad as it could have been. This is the worst assault. 140 police officers wounded. Was the worst assault on the Capitol since the War of 1812. The good news is the insurrectionists did not succeed in killing or kidnapping any lawmakers. That's the good news, because that's what their intention was. And the continuing bullshit from the Republican Party is just slowly fomenting this notion that violence is acceptable to solve our political problems. If we don't like something and it won't be changed, then we just pick up our guns. In one recent conference, Senator Ted Cruz said, the left hates America. While Senator Josh Hawley said their grand ambition is to deconstruct the United States of America. No, in fact, that is not the case. That is not the case. The right wing wants to deconstruct the United States. And I'm sorry, they want to build it in the image and likeness of Nazi Germany. I don't give a shit if you don't like hearing that. That is what is going on here. And the last time people remained ignorant and quiet to this, there was a gentleman named Adolf Hitler, who was very articulate and intelligent and sinister and evil. And we are looking at the same level of hatred in this country right now. We have the GOP pushing laws to marginalize voters of color, take rights away from transgender people, roll back hard-fought rights by LGBT people. take away a woman's right to govern her own body by overturning Roe v. Wade. This should be an indication to you of what their idea of freedom looks like. If it isn't an indication to you yet, maybe you ought to wake up. The American Enterprise Institute found that 39% of Republicans believe, quote, if elected leaders will not protect America, the people must do it themselves, even if it requires violent actions. The use of force is justified. So in other words, let's also embrace vigilantism. If they believe in the police in the United States, they don't need to become involved in this. The one thing the right is a believer in the big blue state. Yet, Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old from another state, found it necessary to cross into another state where he doesn't even live to protect businesses of people he doesn't even know. That is not why he went to Wisconsin. He went there looking for fucking trouble. Not only will I put these stories in here about Kyle Rittenhouse, I will put in a history about Kyle Rittenhouse. Charlottesville. Charlottesville was the precursor to the January 6th insurrection. In 2017, in Charlottesville, there was a Unite the Right rally, Charlottesville, Virginia. So the deal is, in case anybody has forgotten this, and I know many people have, again, it's another thing that we have allowed to slip away from the American psyche. White supremacists and far-right extremists convened in Charlottesville from across the country in August 2017 to protest the removal of a Confederate statue. Many of these people were, quote, marching in Trump's name. The crowds were chanting, quote, Jews will not replace us, and, quote, white lives matter. According to conservative commentator Charlie Sykes, quote, those folks were being brought back into the political mainstream by Donald Trump, and Charlottesville was the moment, end quote. During the rally, 32-year-old Heather Heyer was killed by a neo-Nazi who rammed his car into a crowd of anti-racist protesters. This was an incident that was clearly the tale of these far-right white supremacist powers emboldened and out of control, journalist Wesley Lowery tells Frontline. What did Trump say about that day? He called it, quote, horrible, but initially declined to unequivocally condemn white supremacy. Instead, in an angry back and forth with members of the press, he said both sides present at the rally shared blame and had very fine people among their ranks. Some people publicly rebuked Trump. Mike Pence was not one of them. Although he did condemn white supremacy, he defended his boss. According to Olivia Troy, a former Pence aide, she said, quote, Pence certainly was appalled at the events in Charlottesville. I have heard him say that behind closed doors. The problem is, this is a White House where if he said that, it would be direct contradiction to sort of the sidestepping that the president was doing. By doing that, when you're Mike Pence, you're enabling it to happen again. Former Republican Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee said that the president, quote, did not want to discourage this type of activity. As a matter of fact, he wanted to encourage it. As we have seen over the course of his 4 years of service, the strength among those organizations, their place in what is happening around the country has continued to increase. Several hardcore nativists and white supremacists who participated in Charlottesville were also identified at the Capitol. You have a president of the United States who is willing to give tacit approval to some of the darkest elements of American politics. You can read the rest of this, and this is perfectly true and perfectly horribly accurate. I would encourage everyone to watch this Frontline documentary, 54 minutes and 22 seconds long. The link will be in here. If I thought I could put it on here and play it for you, I would. The sound is often not good. Therefore, the onus is going to be on you to watch this. And I'm going to tell you that another of the things that happened after Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty. I am not going to say innocent. He's not innocent. That's not what the verdict said. They said he was not guilty of killing anyone. He acted in self-defense. In the constraints of the way the case was presented, that is true. But the problem is that he didn't belong there, and he helped to create the frenzy that he was running from and that he had to defend himself from. With regard to Charlottesville, just a couple of days ago, a jury has awarded more than $26 million in damages after finding the white nationalists who organized and participated in the 2017 Charlottesville rally liable on state conspiracy claims and other claims. People will probably never see that money. They're claiming that they are destitute. One of the men who was given the responsibility and the brunt of most of that money is serving several life sentences. These are fine Americans. But that did happen. So we have some people currently who were former members of Trump's entourage. I've already told you that post January 6th, Michael Flynn actually verbally called for a Myanmar-style coup in the United States. I talked about that earlier in this video. This article is in there. Michael Flynn, according to The Hill, made a bizarre remark about the AR-15 that he was given. By the way, he was given this gun as a gift. At the Church of Glad Tidings in Yuba City, they gave him a semi-automatic weapon as a present. You will be able to see right here in this left-hand corner is the presentation to him. So what does Michael Flynn do with that? Okay. Now, he was only 22 days into his service with Trump because he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his communications with Russia. He was later pardoned by Trump. But after receiving this gun as a gift from a bunch of religious people at a church, he said, quote, maybe I'll find somebody in Washington, D.C. I wonder who he was talking about. Again, invoking more violent images, more images of take no prisoners. Maybe let's go see if we can find Joe Biden. The Daily Beast was a little less giving than The Hill. They kind of ripped him a new one, and he deserved it. So we will put that one in also. Madison Cawthorn, Trump minion from North Carolina. In August, he spoke to a group and said that the things that we are wanting to fight for, it doesn't matter if our votes don't count. And this was stated at the Macon County Republican Party headquarters in Franklin, North Carolina. Quote, because, you know, if our election systems continue to be rigged and continue to be stolen, then it's going to lead to one place, and it's bloodshed. Again, promoting the false notion that all the elections are rigged because the Republicans aren't winning, and that the only place it can go is right to bloodshed. Of course, his spokesman, Luke Ball, was trying to convince people that he was condemning violence by calling for clean elections. A video was posted by the county party on Facebook, but it has since been taken down. A brief clip of his comments still appears on Twitter and has been verified by NBC News. He also then said, I will tell you, as much as I am willing to defend our liberty at all costs, there is nothing I would dread doing more than having to pick up arms against a fellow American. He then added that they need to, quote, passionately demand that we have election security in all 50 states, because God knows he does not want to aim his gun at a fellow American. Gee, that's white of him. And according to Vanity Fair, he's talking about civil war at this point, and they're absolutely right. Madison Cawthorn, by the way, who vacationed with his family at Eagle's Nest, Hitler's vacation ground. I'm not even going to go into that. We can quibble about that being a historical trip all we want, but the reality is this is what Donald Trump's people believe in, and that's why they are where they are. Kyle Rittenhouse. He is acquitted, and it's understandable that the jury did its job. The verdict has been accepted. Nobody's on the streets, by the way. I don't see anybody from Black Lives Matter on the streets ripping anything apart, planning to overthrow the government, invade the Capitol over the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse killed Black Lives Matter supporters. In fact, I don't see any of the violence that the right is alleging comes from Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They even lyingly asserted that the people in the Capitol were from Antifa. That is an outright fucking lie. They spend their time putting in everybody's heads that all of this violence comes from the left. This violence comes from the right. It is condoned by the GOP. This is the GOP's problem. This is the GOP's fascist regime. They are trying to install a fascist regime. And the only two people who are speaking out against it, who are on the January 6th Commission are being torched by the GOP for doing so. That is not a party that cares about this country. That is not a party that cares about you as a person, as an American citizen. So I've seen commentary on social media. Some woman posted, "Oh my God, read the article. He cleaned graffiti off a building. He also shot and killed 2 people and maimed a 3rd. Do we understand that, folks? Do we? Let me give you the straight skinny on all of this. Kyle Rittenhouse was too young to buy a gun. He went to Illinois, got a friend to buy him a gun. He then appeared on several talk shows. We'll put that all in. He then traveled across state lines to protect America. He traveled. People want me to believe, you to believe, that a 17-year-old kid cares so much about buildings and preventing looting that he traveled across state lines with an AR-15 to defend businesses and buildings of people he doesn't even know. He was not deputized. There were a lot of people on the streets with guns that day. None of them were deputized. If these people are pro-police, stay the fuck out of it. Kyle Rittenhouse should not have been there. He is not innocent. He was found not guilty of murder. He is not innocent. But that doesn't stop the GOP, because this is what fascists do to normalize this kind of behavior. Marjorie Taylor Greene introduces bill to award Congressional Medal of Honor to Rittenhouse. That's not going to happen. That needs to be signed by the President of the United States. The fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene is even spending time doing this is outrageous. It really is outrageous. North Carolina Rep. Madison Cawthorn, again, offers Kyle Rittenhouse an internship after his acquittal. And Kevin McCarthy, as all of this violence is spreading across the country, remains silent. He has lawmakers under his jurisdiction who are openly talking about violence, and he remains silent. In fact, what Kevin McCarthy is doing right now is trying to find ways to punish the 13 Republican lawmakers who crossed the line and voted for Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. He's not concerned about stopping the violence. He's not concerned about stopping the insurrection. He's not concerned about stopping the future. He's concerned about retaliation for those who did not remain loyal to the Republican Party and his orange jackaloon. And here's a timeline of domestic extremism in the US from Charlottesville in 2017 to January 6, 2021. You can look through this, but let me give you some. We've been here before. 8/12/2017, Charlottesville. August 18th, 2017, Kissimmee, Florida. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, September 12th to the 14th, 2017. Police find a copy of a speech by Adolf Hitler in the home of 23-year-old white man after he allegedly shoots and kills 2 black people. He pleaded not guilty. There is a documentary here that's listed, Documenting Hate, New American Nazis. I suggest you watch that as well. October 27, 2018, a 46-year-old anti-refugee and anti-Semitic extremist who posted hate speeches on social media platforms. The social media platform Gab, which I've taken my group off of over a year ago, is shot and arrested by police after allegedly killing 11 people at a Tree of Life synagogue. April 27, 2019. In an echo of the Tree of Life shooting, a 19-year-old white man who expressed anti-Semitic views on the internet forum 8chan allegedly kills congregant Lori Gilbert Kay and injures 3 others at the Shabbat of Poway synagogue during Passover. In El Paso, a 21-year-old white man allegedly kills 23 people in an attack targeting Latinos at a Walmart. A manifesto posted on 8chan that El Paso police attribute to the alleged shooter references fears of, quote, cultural and ethnic replacement by Latinos. Minneapolis. A 26-year-old supporter of the anti-government group, the Boogaloo Boys. Remember, I spelled boys, B-O-I-S, that's how they spell their name. Allegedly fires rounds from an AK-47 style semi-automatic rifle at a police station in the city's 3rd precinct amid protests over the killing of George Floyd. The incident typifies the movement's use of Black Lives Matter protests to advance its own agenda. And then they turn around and blame Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter? Sorry, folks, always unarmed. No guns. It's against their rules. (5/29) and 6/6/2020. A 32-year-old active duty Air Force Staff Sergeant and self-identified member of the Boogaloo Boys movement allegedly kills a federal protective security officer and wounds another in a drive-by shooting. He then allegedly shoots and kills a Santa Cruz County Sheriff deputy and seriously wounds another officer as police approach his home a week later. He pleads not guilty. Of course he does. None of this can be downplayed. All of this has been amplified since Donald Trump took office. It took him 4 years to normalize white supremacy, violence, misogyny, you name it. We are in serious trouble here. October 8th, 2020, the FBI announces the arrest of 13 men for allegedly planning to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer for what they viewed as her illegal restrictions to combat COVID-19. Again, the opportunity for the right to use measures that need to be taken to protect the public health as oppression by the government. And they will set you free by allowing you to die or killing you, one or the other. (12/21/2020), Salem, Oregon. Dozens of right-wing demonstrators, some of them armed, clashed with police and forced their way into the Oregon State Capitol while the legislature is in session. Okay, folks? Seriously. They were denouncing COVID-19 restrictions and calling for the arrest of Governor Kate Brown. Members of the right-wing group Patriot Prayer are among those who entered the Capitol building. 5 people are eventually arrested. As at the U.S. Capitol 2 weeks later, members of the crowd allegedly spray chemical irritants at police officers. At least 3 participants in the Oregon incident entered the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. This was confirmed by Oregon Public Broadcasting. Here's another article you should read. The Boogaloo Boys have guns, criminal records, and military training. Now they want to overthrow the government. I'm telling you, people, we have serious problems. And we have a Republican Party that is part and parcel to all of this. You people need to wake up. The right wing is not fighting for your rights. The right wing is fighting to take over this government so they can build a nation in the image and likeness of white supremacists. Women won't matter. Gays won't matter. Transgender people won't matter. They'll be outlawed. This is not what America is. We in this country have a duty. You know, I'm going to just say this right now. I have friends who won't say that, but I will. I'm a Democrat, and I'm never voting. I'm never going to abstain from voting again. Never again. I will vote straight Democratic ticket because I believe we are in a situation where these people cannot be allowed to take hold again. If this happens, you know, the problem we have here is that no matter how good you are as a president, it's pretty much a given that you're going to lose the majority in the midterms. It has happened before. You know, it happened to Bush when he was in. It happened to Obama when he was in. It has happened that way throughout most of American history. The problem is right now, if the Democrats lose the majority in 2022, this country's in a world of trouble. And if the Republicans are reelected, if Donald Trump is not held to account for this and he is allowed to run, he will be running this nation unbridled. There will be nothing to hold him back. He is a despot. He loves dictators. That's why he gravitates towards Vladimir Putin. It's why he gravitated towards Kim Jong-il. It is why he endorsed Bolsonaro in Brazil. And as far as coverage of January 6th, I have to tell you, the two longstanding members of Fox News have quit over Tucker Carlson's outright lying sack of shit version of the January 6th insurrection that is running on Fox Media. I will not promote that. You go find it if you want to watch it. There is absolutely not one scintilla of fact or truth in it, but that doesn't matter because you know what? Tucker Carlson and Fox aren't concerned with truth. They're concerned with ratings. And that they have in spades. I will put articles in here about that Tucker Carlson special. I will not put the special in. You want to go spend your time streaming it on Fox? You go ahead and you do that. I watched it because I needed to watch it. And I see it for what it is, but unfortunately, many of you won't. That's the end of this. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I put significant research into this. I will, put all of the articles that I showed you will be in here, but there will certainly be more. I will pull this whole thing together over the next day. I'm going to start assembling this video tonight. I will more than likely upload it on Friday and post it. And again, if you ever wanted to share anything, this is what you need to share. I'm asking you to do that. Unless, of course, you're a right winger and you believe, like all those true believers out there, that the right wing is riding horses and carrying guns for your protection. I'll talk to you all later. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving.